I reserve, Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker.
reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the hypocrisy in this chamber is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Mr. Scalise says H.R. 2 was sent to the Senate, and the Senate ignores the issue. The Senate didn't ignore the issue. The Senate negotiated, as was mentioned before, a very, very tough immigration bill, the toughest ever, negotiated by Senator Lankford, whose reputation is the second most conservative Republican in the Senate. But it didn't pass. Why? Because former President Trump said, don't pass anything. Don't pass H.R. 2. Don't pass the Senate bill. I want an issue. I don't want this issue solved. I don't want a solution. I want an issue for the campaign. That's what the president said. Congressman Nels got up and said the same thing. He said, why should we give a win to a Democrat? Unquote. So don't tell me that anyone is serious about H.R. 2. They're not. And H.R. 2 is so draconian the Senate would not give it more than 32 votes. We know that. We know that H.R. 2 is a fiction in the Senate. We know the Senate negotiated a very strong bill. But that bill could not advance because the president said he didn't want it. And the president, not this president, the former president, Trump, said he didn't want it. And he doesn't want anything to pass on this subject. So don't tell me that the Republicans want a strong immigration bill and the Democrats want open borders. Nobody wants open borders. And there's something else. The Republicans rightly decry the catch and release policy, where someone claims asylum and is then released into the country for years till a trial date comes up to decide whether that asylum claim is valid and should be granted or whether the person should be deported. And that really is intolerable. But President Biden proposed a solution. The solution is very simple. He proposed an appropriation. I forget the amount, but an appropriation that would be sufficient so that those trials would be held in a matter of weeks, not years. So that if someone claimed asylum, he has a right to claim it, he has a right to an adjudication. The adjudication would take place in several weeks, and if the person's case was valid, asylum would be granted, and if the person's claim was not granted, he'd be swiftly deported. So you wouldn't have what they call this invasion. It's not an invasion. This country is composed of people who came from immigration. In 1900, there were 10,000 a day, and they created the current United States, probably the ancestors of most of the people in this country. Immigrants are not a curse. They're a blessing, and we need them for our economy. But we need a legal system, and the legal system can only occur if the adjudications can occur quickly, and the president proposed the means of doing that, and the Republicans rejected that. So they rejected that. They rejected H.R. They rejected the tough bill in the Senate because, as President Trump said, I don't want a solution, I want an issue for the campaign. I yield back. I reserve.